Marvel Spider-Man 2 is a big moment for both the popular superhero video game series and the PlayStation 5. As a PS5 exclusive, Spider-Man stands to be able to leverage the platform's technology in ways that previous games in the series have not. The recent State of Play dropped new information about Marvel Spider-Man 2, including a look at the expanded Marvel's New York, and the ways Insomniac is evolving city exploration. Creative director Brian Intihar provided a deep dive into the expanded Marvel's New York, including the ways they've evolved the game since we last masked up and played as the Spider-Men. New locations, updated exploration, exhilarating traversal, near-instant switching between heroes, a rogues gallery of villains, new abilities and gadgets, and brand new suit styles are just some of the ways it is upgraded this time around. Marvel Spider-Man 2 has shown off the full map of New York City that players will be able to explore once the open-world game launches next month. While his adventures have occasionally seen him travel elsewhere, the vast majority of Spider-Man's stories see the web-slinger protecting the citizens of New York City. As such, it's no surprise that the upcoming Spider-Man 2 is once again set in the Big Apple. Some fans were upset when they found that Spider-Man 2 was set in New York City again, as they felt like the open world would be too similar to the first game. While Manhattan and Harlem will still be in Spider-Man 2, the new game will be expanding its open-world NYC by adding 2 additional boroughs for players to explore. Recently, Insomniac and PlayStation gave fans a look at the full Spider-Man 2 game map to put into perspective just how much the open world is growing. The full look at the Spider-Man 2 map came as part of the game's latest trailer, which also confirmed how many Spider-Man suits players will be able to unlock between Peter Parker and Miles Morales. Early on in the trailer, Insomniac claims that the Spider-Man 2 map is nearly double the size as the original game thanks to the addition of Queens and Brooklyn. Spider-Man 2 fans are then treated to a look at the full map as it will appear in the game. As players explore open-world New York City, they will have a variety of ways to get around. Of course, Insomniac's celebrated web-swinging system is back in full force in Spider-Man 2, but just as the map is expanding, so too are traversal options. The big new addition in Spider-Man 2 are the web wings that will let players glide through the air, adding a potentially game-changing dynamic to traversal. Besides the web wings, it's possible that Peter's symbiote suit will also shake up how players explore the game world. Players will also be able to switch between Peter Parker and Miles Morales in the open world, near instantly thanks to the power of the PlayStation 5. Both Spider heroes are important characters to the grand story we're telling in Marvel Spider-Man 2, and each will have their own separate side stories to uncover throughout the city. Help students at Brooklyn Visions as Miles Morales or accept new requests for aid as Peter Parker via the friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man app. You can even choose to tackle certain activities as either Spider-Man, separately, or do them combined. Insomniac recently gave players an even better look at some of the new locations being introduced in Marvel Spider-Man 2 in the latest New York Times feature on the game. A series of detailed screenshots depict the bustling Times Square, the fabled Coney Island, and Brooklyn's historic Grand Army Plaza Arch. All of these famous landmarks are rendered in an impressive level of detail, demonstrating both Insomniac's commitment to capturing New York City and the PlayStation 5's technical capabilities. In past interviews, Insomniac Games creative director Brian Intihar stated that his team wanted to make Spider-Man 2's new locations feel different from the Manhattan area utilized in the previous games. For example, Queens feels more like a smaller neighborhood with shorter buildings that make great use of Spider-Man 2's new web wings. Not every part of the real-life New York will be included in Spider-Man 2 though, as Insomniac couldn't secure the rights to use the famous Chrysler building in-game. Insomniac has proven itself to be a technical wizard when it comes to achieving current-gen feats that few other developers truly have yet. And that's without contemplating its sheer output of AAA experiences. So when more of Marvel's Spider-Man 2 was surprisingly shown during Thursday's State of Play, it wasn't at all alarming that the sequel looks as terrific as it does. Graphically, it is where current-gen quality should arguably be. What's more impressive is Marvel Spider-Man 2's near-instantaneous load times on the PS5 and how Insomniac has taken advantage of that to create fluid traversal in a bigger open world. Marvel Spider-Man 2's open world was recently given an informative showcase discussing what players can expect from it, and it's mainly what fans might have expected. There's a lot to do with new AR UI that pops up in the environment, building atop what players were accustomed to in Marvel Spider-Man and Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales. And it seems like the best of both worlds in that regard now that Miles and Genk's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man app is being reprised from the latter. The new boroughs and landmarks in Marvel's Spider-Man 2's New York City are organic because they're locations that the two Spider-Man protagonists are inhabiting this time around. 9 months after the events of Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, Peter is living in his late aunt's home in Queens and Miles attends Brooklyn Vision's Academy, for example. While Coney Island makes for a wonderful cherry on top as a fun hangout destination for Peter, Miles, Mary Jane, and Harry. Circling back to the recent State of Play trailer that offered another look at Spider-Man's new water gliding ability. Insomniac Senior Community Manager Aaron Jason Espinoza highlighted how that system is similar to the water dashing mechanics from Sunset Overdrive. Elaborating on that point, the studio official shared some gameplay footage from the company's first and only Xbox console exclusive, demonstrating how traversing water in Sunset Overdrive indeed looks similar to the way players will be able to glide across the Hudson River and other bodies of water in Marvel's Spider-Man 2. The mechanic itself was first confirmed as part of the Marvel Spider-Man 2 gameplay reveal back in May, which included a linear section wherein Peter Parker was dashing between some moving boats during an action-packed set piece. And while that particular trailer showed Spider-Man essentially surfing on water while hanging onto a web stuck to a speedboat, Espinoza has now confirmed that this was a purely stylistic choice. Responding to a fan question on Twitter, the Insomniac official said that water gliding in Marvel's Spider-Man 2 won't actually require any web use whatsoever. The extra mobility provided by this water traversal mechanic will likely see plenty of use among the fandom. Not least because the map of Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is nearly double the size of its predecessor and includes even more bodies of water. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 made a surprise appearance today at the near-spontaneous PlayStation State of Play. Indeed, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 being there at all was unprecedented due to the showcase supposedly only claiming to feature VR and third-party titles, but it also makes sense with previews circulating and impressions being shared this weekend. Either way, Insomniac decided to make its way to this State of Play in order to publicly share more about how moment-to-moment gameplay will be structured in Marvel's Spider-Man 2 and its open-world New York City boroughs. Finally unveiling the open world and especially the AR UI that highlights waypoints makes that almost impossible without only revealing a few seconds of it, or if information is explicitly obscured. Insomniac did this, in fact, to purposefully hide the names of points of interest in the open world and its world map. However, one symbol insignia was on display and even addressed pointedly by Intihar, who described a green, diamond-shaped eye logo as a mysterious symbol. It's possible that this adjective was meant to only obscure what it could reference further. But the more obvious revelation is that this logo belongs to the illusory villain and special effects artist Mysterio. It isn't clear what these symbols mark and what Mysterio's role in the game could be, but with many of them scattered through different districts and boroughs, it makes sense to assume that he would be an antagonist whom players have to complete many prerequisite collectible or item hunting tasks for. Mysterio is a beloved villain, actually my favorite Spider-Man villain, and his abilities could be incredibly exciting in Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Insomniac has now confirmed that Marvel's Spider-Man 2 will feature over 65 alternate costumes. Both Peter Parker and Miles Morales are known for wearing multiple spider suits in their many appearances in comics, TV shows, and movies. And the previous two Marvel Spider-Man games featured several of them for players to unlock and equip. Some of these suits grant Peter and Miles special abilities to help them take down enemies or more easily swing across the vast open-world version of New York City that Insomniac has crafted in its take on the popular Marvel icon. This is just the tip of the iceberg for Marvel's Spider-Man 2, as Insomniac has confirmed that the game will feature over 65 unlockable suits during September 14th State of Play livestream. During the show's Spider-Man 2 segment, Senior Creative Director Brian Inthier stated that this selection includes outfits from the comics and movies in addition to original designs from Insomniac. Players will have even more variety in how their spider hero looks thanks to the game's new suit style system, which offers different variations for each suit, meaning that Spider-Man 2 will have more than 200 possible options overall. The black and white suit was notably absent in Marvel's Spider-Man, and purposefully so. It was revealed later on that Insomniac wanted to do the symbiote suit justice and not have its inclusion be debuted as one of many optional cosmetics, but instead a narratively poignant addition. That was also made evident when the symbiote itself was revealed at the end of Marvel's Spider-Man in Harry's stasis chamber, and from then on fans could speculate on how the suit would look. On the other hand, Insomniac's previous fast travel implementations were full of charm, and that will be missed regardless of how seamlessly quick fast travel is now. Fast travel in Marvel's Spider-Man always brought about an obvious loading screen, but instead of having it be a static image of something with text in front of it. Marvel's Spider-Man remained immersive by representing that fast travel with Spider-Man riding the subway. This came as a variety of different cinematics with Spider-Man in different positions on the subway. And while they were fairly quick themselves, it was a nice touch when having to supply some sort of load screen in the meantime. Fast travel was never a necessity in Marvel's Spider-Man since it is exhilarating and quick to maneuver through the city anyway. But these fun cinematics made it worthwhile if players couldn't be bothered to swing on over to the other side of Manhattan. Insomniac might not be thinking that far ahead for each and every suit it decides to include. But this suggests that the symbiote suit was withheld in order for a sequel to introduce it in the narrative. If players had been able to wear it beforehand, seeing the symbiote suit in Marvel's Spider-Man 2's story would have lacked the same punch and disrupted any immersion players had between games. The symbiote suit has profound importance in the story, at least where Peter and Harry's relationship stands. And this is a lesson fans can learn from when it comes to what costumes are added to the game as optional suit skins. The superior Spider-Man costume, for instance, is one that was revealed during the PlayStation State of Play last week and might be written off from ever having a place in the game's canon as a result. Moving forward, fans can expect that any Spider-Man storylines tethered to costumes will not be adapted in a Marvel Spider-Man story if the player can wear it idly as an optional skin. This might only affect instances where Peter or Miles themselves would wear the suit. And presumably not some multiversal Spider-Man who may or may not appear based on rumors of side quests in Marvel's Spider-Man 2, but it is still important to consider. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 will allow fans to choose from multiple frame rate options, and developer Insomniac Games has also confirmed that all modes support ray tracing. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 launches in just over a month, and Sony has been slowly revealing new details about the game in the lead-up to its launch. Mike Fitzgerald, the director of core technology at Insomniac, and Jeanette Lee, who is the project director for Spider-Man 2, revealed the technical achievement on the PS5, which dives a bit more into the technical side of developing Spider-Man 2. Marvel Spider-Man 2 players will have a choice between 30 FPS, 40 FPS and 60 FPS modes while playing the game. Additionally, all three graphics options will support ray tracing, with no option to turn off this feature. Gamers should note that the resolution and graphics settings could be different depending upon the graphics mode they choose. And there probably will be a noticeable difference in the overall visuals between the three modes. They also said they vastly improved the 3D audio and SSD utilization of the PS5. Other PS5 games developed by Insomniac Games, such as Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, came with a 60 FPS performance mode that supports ray tracing, in addition to a 40 FPS mode for users with a capable display that supports 120 Hz. So, it looks like the same trend will continue with Marvel Spider-Man 2, and fans will be able to play the game in their preferred graphical mode at launch. Insomniac has really been consistent with their quality fast-paced output, and leveraged things like many performance options and ray tracing to new heights on consoles. I can't wait for Marvel Spider-Man 2, and the hype is insane among gamers leading to its launch. Capcom has officially confirmed that the Resident Evil 4 Remake's highly anticipated Separate Ways DLC will be coming to the game next week. The Resident Evil 4 Remake launched in a somewhat content-deficient state compared to previous versions of the game. While the main campaign was expanded in some ways, a boss was cut, Mercenaries was nowhere to be found, and neither Assignment Ada nor Separate Ways was available. Since Resident Evil 4 Remake's launch, Capcom has updated the game to add Mercenaries, but kept quiet about Assignment Ada and Separate Ways. Assignment Ada is still missing in action, but fans have finally received confirmation that Resident Evil 4 Remake will indeed be adding an updated version of Separate Ways. And better yet, Separate Ways is coming to the Resident Evil 4 Remake sooner than expected. The Resident Evil 4 Remake Separate Ways DLC is coming on September 21st. Like the original version of Separate Ways, the DLC will follow Ada Wong in a story that runs concurrently during the events of the main RE4 game. This provides a new perspective on the events of Resident Evil 4 and reveal exactly what Ada was up to while Leon was busy trying to save Ashley. Since there were some slight changes made in the main Resident Evil 4 Remake game, it will be interesting to see if Separate Ways has any changes as well. Separate Ways was the big announcement for the Resident Evil 4 Remake, but it wasn't the only reveal Capcom had for the critically acclaimed horror game at the latest PlayStation State of Play. During the event, Capcom provided a narrower release window for the Resident Evil 4 Remake VR mode. While fans will still have to wait to get a more specific release date, they can count on the VR mode for the Resident Evil 4 Remake dropping at some point this coming winter. And finally, Resident Evil 4 Remake fans can also expect a free content update for the Mercenaries game mode. Releasing alongside Separate Ways on September 21st is a big Mercenaries update that will add Ada Wong and Albert Wesker as playable characters. This brings the total number of playable characters in the Resident Evil 4 Remake's Mercenaries mode to 6, with Ada and Wesker joining Leon, Louise Sarah, Jack Krauser, and Hunk. It's unclear if this will be the last update to Mercenaries or if Capcom has more planned. While the original version of Resident Evil 4's Separate Ways was not nearly as short as Assignment Ada, which stood as a non-canon event to the main story, fans will hold hope for an extended version this time around. Given the added scope and size of the base game experience of the Resident Evil 4 Remake, with new enemies to encounter, new environments, changed sequences, and much more, the expectation is that this will be seen within its DLCs as well. With some of the areas and locations from the original base game still present here, such as the cable car section, fans suspect that these will be used for Ada's experience, potentially contributing to a longer runtime with new content to discover. Speaking of reused locations from the original potentially coming into play for Separate Ways, the same is suspected with Resident Evil 4's bosses, more notably U3, which was cut from the base game. Given the variety of scenarios in which Ada appeared to save or encounter Leon in the main campaign, it would make sense for more of these to result in boss battles, especially with Chief Mendez. Given the original's use of Ada fighting Sadler in his base form before finally going head-to-head with Leon, Capcom could reinvent this with Chief Mendez after Ada saves Leon from his grasp early on in the game. For players who may have been frustrated with the lack of screen time or encounters with Mendez aside from Leon and Ashley's escape before the boss fight, developers could change this by increasing Ada's presence in the village for much longer by clashing with the Big Cheese. Given the more frequent appearances from Albert Wesker in Resident Evil 4 Remake, it suggests that Capcom is preparing a more pivotal role for the character in Separate Ways. For players familiar with the original in 2005, Wesker did not show up during the main campaign and would only be on screen during the Separate Ways playthrough. With the reimagining featuring Wesker in the main campaign for a few brief moments, fans may be preparing for new sequences within Separate Ways here. Unless the scenes from the base game will be reused for the DLC. Coming at the events of Resident Evil 4 from a new perspective, the Separate Ways DLC is sure to surprise new fans with a few fun little twists and turns. And one of those revolves around Ada Wong's mysterious employer, Albert Wesker. For longtime fans of Resident Evil, Albert Wesker is a household name, being one of the most iconic figures in the entire franchise. But for those who have only recently jumped on the Resident Evil train, Wesker is likely an unknown entity at this point. And Resident Evil 4's Separate Ways DLC has the perfect opportunity to set the character up for his potential upcoming appearances. A character that's been in Resident Evil since the very beginning, Albert Wesker was central to the first game's big twist, with the STRS operative turning out to be a double agent working for Umbrella. The most recent appearance of Wesker came right at the end of Resident Evil 4 Remake, during the game's post-credits scene, where it's revealed that he's the one who hired Ada Wong to steal the vial of amber from the island. The post-credits scene ends with Ada Wong asking Wesker what he'll do with the amber, to which he states that it'll be the one big change to save the world, and the cause of billions of casualties, teasing a potential Resident Evil 5 remake. Of course, with Wesker being Ada's employer, this naturally lends itself to him having a more prominent presence in Resident Evil 4's Separate Ways DLC. In the original Separate Ways campaign, Wesker only appeared a handful of times, giving Ada orders via her comms. But in the last few Resident Evil remakes, Capcom hasn't been afraid of adding new content, both in terms of gameplay and story. While some of these remake additions are seemingly incidental, there are a handful of changes that retroactively add a great deal of context and detail to the Resident Evil timeline. One of the biggest examples of this comes in Resident Evil 4 Remake, where Luis Serra gets a completely new backstory that ties him into the events of the greater Resident Evil universe, making him one of the researchers who worked on the Nemesis project. If Capcom is willing to add huge changes like that for Luis, then it's definitely a possibility that Wesker will receive more of a prominent role in the Separate Ways DLC, especially if a Resident Evil 5 remake is currently in the works. Albert Wesker is ultimately the main antagonist of Resident Evil 5, plotting to use his Ouroboros virus to infect the globe. While Wesker will probably be more than captivating enough in a potential Resident Evil 5 remake, his role as a mega-villain could be better fleshed out in the lead-up to the remake's release, and the best place for that groundwork to be laid is in this Separate Ways DLC. Given the fact that both Ada and Wesker are yet to be added to the Mercenaries roster, it appears as though Capcom is leaving this behind the release of Separate Ways, once fans can experience the potential added changes. With the many terrifying circumstances that both Leon and Ashley face whether together or alone, it would be a huge miss for this aspect to be omitted from Separate Ways again. While it remains subjective as to how scary both the original and remake of Resident Evil 4 are, there is no doubt that Capcom has made an extra effort with this reimagining to provide an experience that has a greater balance between action and horror. The original Separate Ways still stood as an engaging and worthwhile experience for fans, but the change in favor of pure action over horror was clear to see. Given the fact that Ada is likely to be acting alone for the majority of the time, this would be a perfect opportunity for Capcom to implement sequences that continue to evoke the survival horror elements that the franchise is mostly known for, and this will help to differentiate and improve this version of Separate Ways to its predecessor. Just as the original did, the aftermath of the cabin fight features discussions between Luis and Ada as the pair work together to find the Amber. As players spend a considerable amount of time away from Luis apart from the aforementioned cabin fight and the sequences leading up to his unfortunate demise, it would be very fitting to see him alongside Ada during Separate Ways, even if it is for a short period. As Luis' screen time in the base game was not that much longer than the originals despite his presence during the encounter with the two giants, Dos Gigantes, and the epic minecart ride. This would be the right time to adhere to this, maybe even leading to him being playable if Ada becomes incapacitated. Resident Evil 4 Remake is among 2023's greatest games. With the release of these major DLC offerings later this month, Resident Evil 4 Remake will finally offer longtime fans the full original experience, and more immersive ways to experience it than ever before. Sony has revealed the release date of Helldivers 2, confirming that the game will launch on February 8, 2024. Helldivers 2 was officially announced at the PlayStation Showcase event in May, revealing a shift to a third-person perspective instead of top-down gameplay. The initial trailer for Helldivers 2 stated that it will come out on PS5 and PC in 2023. Furthermore, a recent leak suggested that Helldivers 2 will release in October 2023, a month already packed with big releases including Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Sony has now confirmed that Helldivers 2 has been delayed to February 2024, while also giving fans a new look at its gameplay mechanics. Helldivers 2 received a brand new trailer at the recent State of Play event, showing co-op gameplay in addition to a brief look at its menus. The Helldivers 2 trailer features a squad of 4 players taking on a massive enemy, while also showing the different types of weapon and equipment fans will have access to in the game. It then gives users a short glimpse at the various customization options available in Helldivers 2, before confirming a release date of February 8, 2024. Finally, the trailer confirms that pre-orders for the game will start on September 22, 2023, from 1 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. 2023 has already been an incredible year for new game releases, and its last few months are no exception. While this delay allows Helldivers 2 to potentially avoid a busy period, February 2024 is also packed with big games, including Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League, Persona 3 Reload and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So, it'll be interesting to see how Helldivers 2 performs on PS5 and PC when it launches early next year. During September 14's PlayStation State of Play, Tales of Arise debuted a new trailer for its forthcoming story DLC, Beyond the Dawn. It also confirmed the Tales of Arise DLC would release on November 9th, putting it just 2 months away. Tales of Arise originally launched in 2021 to generally favorable reception, making this a bit of a surprise. A trademark for Tales of Arise Beyond the Dawn was filed in late 2022, but it's likely many fans have forgotten about it in the silence since. Not to mention, trademarks don't always manifest, but many fans will be happy this one did. Taking place 1 year after the events of the base game, Tales of Arise Beyond the Dawn sees Alphen, Xian, and the gang continue their journey and meet a young girl named Nazamil who is being pursued because her father was a lord. There appears to be something special about here, though it is not clear from this new trailer if Nazamil will join as a party member in Tales of Arise Beyond the Dawn. On top of that, there is some form of political commentary in regard to Donna and Rena going on, and it'll be interesting to see how all of this connects. Fans can expect more info in the coming months. Other announcements from the State of Play include a new Avatar Frontiers of Pandora trailers, Honkai Star Rail trailer, Ghostbusters Rise of the Ghost Lord for the PSVR 2, Ghostrunner 2 demo announcement, and a game that set one of the hilarious and bizarre opening for a gaming showcase of all time. It is a physics-based game called Baby Steps, where you have to control the legs, feet and balance the weight of the protagonist to survive the wilds and to return back home. The game might look weird, but I'm interested to play it and find out how innovative the gameplay is. At the end of the September 14th PlayStation State of Play, Square Enix revealed a new trailer for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that confirmed the game's release date of February 29, 2024, and showed some new features in addition to some returning locales from the original game. The trailer also showed some new things coming to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, including Cloud riding a Segway in Costa del Sol and some new attractions for players to try in the Gold Saucer. The new trailer for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth arrived just over 3 months after it was officially revealed at Summer Game Fest. With events picking up immediately following the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, the Summer Game Fest trailer showed locations such as the Calm Inn, the cannon above Junon Harbor, and the various fields that Cloud and the party will travel both on foot and on the backs of chocobos. While the initial release window was early 2024, the latest trailer from Square Enix narrowed that down to an exact date. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will be released on February 29, 2024, also known as Leap Day. Pre-orders started shortly after the State of Play concluded. In the trailer, Cloud was disguised as a Shinra officer during the presidential ceremony of Rufus Shinra in Junon Harbor, and Rufus ordered the giant Mako cannon to fire as a show of might. In addition to Cloud's Segway traversals in Costa del Sol, the trailer also confirmed that Kate Sith and Vincent Valentine would appear in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This left Sid Highwind as the last remaining member of the original cast who had not debuted in the FF7 Remake series. The trailer also showed scenes from the Nibelheim flashback, which would likely take place in the game's opening hours. The trailer also showed off additional summons that Cloud and the party can obtain, including Odin, Kujata, Leviathan, and Alexander. In addition to exploring the environment on the back of a chocobo, Cloud will also take part in chocobo races at the Gold Saucer. Both chocobo racing and the iconic motorcycle chase are among the classic minigames that will return from the original Final Fantasy VII. Between the unique release date and the many ways that the ending of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth could play out, excitement for Square Enix's next entry remains high. Viewers got a glimpse of Red 13 in combat as part of the new trailer. Players are now able to control him directly. Red 13 doesn't just have an ATB gauge but also uses his own unique Revenge Gauge mechanic. His Revenge Gauge charges when he guards against enemy attacks, and he can spend that charge to use various abilities once the gauge is filled. The original party members are all present in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. In the previous title, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Red 13 became an accompanying member in the second half of the game, but he will become an official playable party member starting from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Similarly, there are characters who are accompanying members in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that will become official party members in the next title. We have seen Red 13 and Kate Sith shown as playable characters, and the footage released also shows another character who looks like Vincent Valentine, the vampire. Once the team leaves Midgar, Cloud and the team's major objective Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is to follow and track down Sephiroth across the expansive world they find themselves in. The world map is vast and expansive, so not all of the locations on it will be used in the main story alone. In fact, volume-wise, the amount of side content in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is nearly double that of the main quest content. Players who want to enjoy Final Fantasy VII setting on an even deeper level can explore all the corners of the world, discovering many different and exciting experiences such as new stories, battles, and mini-games to play. It will also be possible to return to any of the regions in the world even after the main quest moves on from that area, so you don't have to worry about leaving things behind or unfinished. The order in which you can explore the locations is not the same as the original Final Fantasy VII, and there are some shifts in the order. For example, Wutai, one of the major locations, is not part of the route in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and will be visited in the next one. Although there are some changes in the order of the locations depicted in this title extend up to the Forgotten Capital, where the greatest fate of Final Fantasy VII awaits you. In 3 consecutive Twitter posts, producer Yoshinori Kaitase, director Naoki Hamaguchi, and creative director Tetsuya Nomura shared messages confirming what to expect once Final Fantasy VII Rebirth launches. Hamaguchi mentioned that the game's focus is free exploration, citing the presence of the world map. He concludes by stating that nearly 100 hours of adventure awaits. Kaitase mentioned that familiar elements from the previous game will be present but will see many enhancements throughout. There was also confirmation that Rebirth can stand as a standalone adventure, yet a recap of the last title will be provided for those who need to catch up. Finally, Nomura reiterates that Rebirth is the second of a 3-part adventure that fans will be excited to experience. New characters await the fans, as well as surprises that await everybody's fates. There was quite a lot to take in with the latest FF7 Rebirth trailer. From showing off playable Red 13 to plenty of cutscene previews starring Zack Fair, fans will likely be busy trying to understand what the trailer showed for the next while. Some mysteries in the trailer likely won't be answered until the release date, which has been revealed to be February 29, 2024. However, the ending showed yet another climactic fight with Sephiroth, similar to the battle that happened at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake. In this battle, Sephiroth states, "It's upon us, the reunion. When worlds merge." This appears to be showing Sephiroth's greater goals. At the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, Cloud and company are shown visions of things yet to come as they fight the arbiters of fate. However, it's possible that these visions were not of their future, but of alternate worlds that may be farther than they are in the timeline. Or perhaps Sephiroth's previous world, as it's been heavily implied that this version of him comes from after Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. Regardless, with such a heavy emphasis on the still-alive Zack and Sephiroth, it appears the One-Winged Angel's end goal is to combine the multiverse into one. While it's fair to say that beyond certain elements, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a wild card and it's clear to see where the later half of the game may go with this sort of story lurking behind it. As it seems that Zack has his own story and role to play, as evident by what's seen in the trailer and how heavily he's emphasized as a character. At some point these two universes will converge due to Sephiroth's will. Depending on how this reunion of universes pans out, though. The third game may differ the most, as Zack Fair and possibly a few other unexpected guests might show up and stick around to help defeat Sephiroth once and for all and save all their worlds at once. Even though this sort of twist in the overall story of the remake project was teased since the first game came out in 2020, it's rather interesting to see FF7 Rebirth go all in on it. Square Enix revealed the collector's edition of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is now available for pre-orders. The limited edition bundle was announced during the latest PlayStation State of Play live stream. Following up on that announcement, Square Enix also revealed the collector's edition of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is now available at $350. Thus being even more expensive than the first-class edition of Final Fantasy VII Remake. However, the limited edition bundle is not lacking in quality merch, with the star of the show being a 19-inch statue of Sephiroth. An exclusive steelbook and hardback art book are also part of the package, as is a CD of the game's abridged soundtrack. The included physical copy of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth comes with a reversible cover, as well as a redeemable code for all the digital goodies attached to the $100 deluxe edition of the game. The only bonus not included in the most expensive version of the JRPG is a Mughal Trio Summoning Materia Pack, which is exclusive to its Digital Deluxe Edition. That's hardly a major omission, as the upcoming game will presumably allow players to also discover the said summoning item through regular play, much like Final Fantasy VII Remake did. Despite its steep price tag, the collector's edition of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth isn't likely to stay in stock for long. Fans interested in pre-ordering the bundle can only do so via the Square Enix store. There's no precedent to assume that this limited edition collection will make a return should the game ever reach other platforms. Near the end of this trailer, after showing the game's release date, Square Enix revealed a special digital twin pack for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where players can pre-order Rebirth while also purchasing Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade at the same time. What this trailer didn't explain was that this Final Fantasy VII Rebirth twin pack is priced at $70, while the standard edition of Rebirth is at the same price. The current price of Intergrade by itself on PS5 is $40. So purchasing the twin pack essentially gets the player a free copy of FF7 Remake and the intermission DLC while securing their digital order of Rebirth. This twin pack can be upgraded to the Digital Deluxe Edition, giving players the Digital Deluxe version of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This upgrade costs an additional $20, which gives gamers access to a digital mini soundtrack, art book, and other early game items. A pre-order bonus of the Mughal Trio materia also comes with this version. This should be a great deal for gamers who are looking to play Final Fantasy VII Remake for the first time, or those who want to play Rebirth but haven't bought the Intergrade version's DLC of the first part yet. As the name implies, the digital twin pack is only available for gamers who buy the game digitally, meaning there is no equivalent deal for physical pre-orders. Final Fantasy VII Remake was originally released as a PS4 exclusive, but it eventually made its way to PS5 with an enhanced version that featured additional content. Square Enix eventually brought Final Fantasy VII Remake to PC nearly 2 years after it launched on PS4. But it seems fans may not have to wait nearly as long to play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on a non-PlayStation platforms. This was confirmed by the latest Final Fantasy VII Rebirth trailer, specifically the one featured on the official Final Fantasy YouTube channel. While the PlayStation version of the trailers made no mention of this, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is only obligated to stay PS5 exclusive until May 29, 2024, at which point it could theoretically release for any other platform. Since Square Enix brought Final Fantasy VII Remake to PC, one has to imagine that a PC version of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is the most likely possibility, but fans shouldn't rule out the game coming to Xbox or even Nintendo. Xbox has been strengthening its relationship with Square Enix, as evidenced by the Xbox port of Final Fantasy XIV that's coming out next year. Considering this, one has to wonder if Square Enix will bring Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth to Xbox platforms as well. Nothing to that effect has actually been announced, but it wouldn't be surprising. As far as Nintendo goes, reputable leakers have suggested that Square Enix has already ported Final Fantasy VII Remake to the Nintendo Switch's successor. If those leaks are to be believed, the new Nintendo console is powerful enough to play Final Fantasy VII Remake at a level mostly similar to the PS5 version. This could mean that the next Nintendo console is powerful enough to run Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but that's just speculation at this time. It's also worth pointing out that just because Final Fantasy VII Rebirth can be released on other platforms after May 29, 2024, it doesn't mean that it actually will. The game could very well stay PS5 exclusive indefinitely. Fans of Final Fantasy should keep an eye out for potential new details surrounding FF7 Rebirth coming on September 22 on Tokyo Game Show at Square Enix booth. And that's all for the video, guys. Like and share the video for a greater audience. Comment your thoughts on the topics, and donations are always appreciated. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon, and until then, from SMPV, it's goodbye.